We are barely 6 weeks in, and this already is quite the theme. They are trying all sorts of incredibly reckless, incredibly expensive, incredibly ill-advised things. And then those things fail because they can't work or because they can't handle the pushback against them, or they face lawsuits and court orders because these things are obviously illegal, or they're just too stupid to live. And so then they stop doing these things and they cave and they try to pretend they weren't doing them at all. We're only 6 weeks in, and we're already seeing this for military flights for deportations and sending immigrants to Guantanamo for some reason, right? Those things already appear to be over as of today. Also, this one today. Headline: Trump agency pulls 443 sites off market in real estate reversal. Real estate reversal? What? This is from Bloomberg News. Quote, at 2 p.m. Tuesday, so yesterday, the GSA posted a list of 443 properties it was considering for sale, an inventory that ranged from a toll booth in El Paso to the FDA's research campus in Silver Spring, Maryland. Trump tried to fire the chief of the Merit Systems Protection Board. A court ordered her reinstated. Today, that Merit Systems Protection Board ordered the reinstatement of more than 5,000 people who work for the USDA, for the U.S. Department of Agriculture. 5,000 people who were illegally mass fired by Trump. Those more than 5,000 people must now be reinstated for at least the next 45 days. That ruling comes after Trump tried to fire another person he's not allowed to fire, Hampton Dellinger, who heads up the federal office that oversees whistleblower protections and civil service protections. Trump tried to fire him, too. That is apparently illegal. Dellinger has fought it vociferously in the courts, including one trip already to the Supreme Court, and it looks like another trip to the Supreme Court is probably on the way. But in the meantime, while he has been reinstated, he told the Merit Systems Protection Board to weigh in on the mass firings at USDA, which appeared to be blatantly illegal. That board did weigh in on them. They had to fight their own firings along the way to get there, but they fought them, and now those more than 5,000 workers at USDA must be reinstated. A ruling by a federal judge in California on the illegality of mass firings carried out by Trump's Office of Personnel Management. That ruling appears to have stopped Trump for now from going ahead with his plan to fire more than 5,000 people from the Department of Defense. Quote, the Pentagon's planned firing of 5,400 employees has been temporarily delayed after a federal court decision blocking such dismissals. Same thing at the National Science Foundation. The director of the National Science Foundation has ordered 84 of the 170 employees who were laid off from that agency last month to be reinstated immediately. The reversal comes in response to a federal judge's ruling that the Trump administration exceeded its authority when it outlined steps to fire an estimated 200,000 federal workers. Same vibe, different explanation, or rather sort of lack of an explanation. When it comes to people fired from the CDC. Quote, emails went out Tuesday to about 180 CDC employees who got termination notices last month. A message was sent with the subject line, quote, read this email immediately. It said, quote, after further review and consideration, a February 15th termination notice has been rescinded. Employees were told they were cleared to return to work today, Wednesday. Quote, you should return to duty under your previous work schedule. We apologize for any disruption that this may have caused. Associated Press notes, quote, the CDC is just the latest federal agency trying to coax back workers soon after they were fired. Similar reversals have been made among employees responsible for medical device oversight, food safety, bird flu response, nuclear weapons, and national parks. So military flights for deportations? No. Sending random immigrants to Guantanamo like they're al-Qaeda or something? No. Selling the CIA? No. And the Justice Department and the VA and every other federal building they can find in the phone book? No. Firing the guy who's in charge of whistleblowers? No. Firing the Merit Systems Protection Board? No. Firing 5,000 people at USDA? No. The firings at the National Science Foundation and the CDC and the fricking Pentagon? No. No. Not all of them, at least. Not as many as can be stopped. And then there was today at the United States Supreme Court an unsigned, mealy-mouthed, mild-mannered, seemingly deliberately obtuse and confusing little ruling from the United States Supreme Court. That I mentioned it was unsigned, but it nevertheless did brush Trump back. Supreme Court today allowed to stand that court ruling we covered here last week, in which Trump was ordered to restart foreign aid funding that was approved by law that he had nevertheless illegally stopped. The ruling was 5-4. Chief Justice John Roberts and Trump-appointed Justice Amy Coney Barrett siding with Elena Kagan, Ketanji Brown Jackson, and Sonia Sotomayor in telling Trump no. Pushback comes in all sorts of ways. Lawsuits, court orders, individual officials refusing to go quietly and fighting personally as high as they possibly can to keep standing the systems and protections inside our government that are supposed to protect us and protect the American government from arbitrary and corrupt lawless action. There is friction and resistance inside the government and in the U.S. military when people are being asked to do things that are expensive and pointless and wasteful and embarrassing and ultimately indefensible, even when they happen on Fox News at 7 o'clock. There is journalism and therefore public attention to the indefensible costs and consequences of some of their most hurtful and ill-advised decisions. The local news coverage, for example, of the cost to American families and especially to American small businesses of Trump's this tariff stunt that he's pulling. The local news coverage of this has just been devastating. And it is unavoidable. It is in red states and blue states all across this country, in cities and small towns and anywhere there is a news outlet. And so, yes, today they've started to say, OK, maybe not on some of these tariffs. We will have more on that coming up tonight. But it's also very brave people, very relentless and brave people protesting, engaging in civil disobedience. People are willing to be arrested if necessary. It's also people peacefully protesting in the streets. Look, this was Boise, Idaho yesterday. This is at the capital of one of the most conservative states in the country. This is Boise, Idaho. People protesting against Trump in the lead up to his State of the Union address last night. This was Phoenix, Arizona yesterday. Another big crowd protesting at their state capitol ahead of Trump's speech last night. Look at the numbers that turned out yesterday in Utah, in Salt Lake City, Utah. Look at this. Utah, bright red Utah. Look at the people who turned out in Little Corning, New York, and in Bakersfield, California, and in West Hartford, Connecticut, and outside the office of the Office of Personnel Management in Washington, D.C. Pushback takes all forms. And it has turned them back, or at least slowed them down, on almost everything they have tried to do already. And it's easy to get overwhelmed with what they're trying to do. But look also at what they have been stopped from doing, what they have been slowed down from doing, what they've been embarrassed over, and what they've had to quietly claw back, hoping no one notices. I mean, they're clearly bent on an authoritarian takeover and destruction of the U.S. government, right? There's no illusions now as to what they're trying to do. They know they need to go fast if they are going to go far. Today, the headline showed the increasing scope of their appetite, right, to try to destroy more and do it more thoroughly. They want to fire 80,000 people from the VA, and they'll tell you they love veterans while they're doing it. The firing of 80,000 people from the VA, among other things, will be the firing of tens of thousands of veterans themselves who hold those jobs. But they're going to try it, see how much of that they can get away with. They said today they want to fire 40,000 plus people from the IRS. Because what better way to grind a country into dust than to eliminate the means by which it collects funds so it can continue to operate? If last night's State of the Union and the latest pronouncements from the president's top campaign donor are anything to go by, it would seem that they're about to come next for Social Security. So the VA, the IRS, Social Security. And then tonight there's this. reopening the immigration prison where they locked up all the little kids. Quote, the Trump administration is reopening a sprawling detention center in South Texas for migrant families facing deportation, resuming the practice of detaining children 4 years after the Biden administration ended it. Everywhere they go, everything they have tried to do, they are running up against opposition and annoyance. They are running up against their own stupidity. They are running up against their own ignorance. They are running up against the law. They are running up against journalists figuring out what they are doing. They are running up against the revelation that the American people really dislike what they are doing, and people are willing to let that be known. They are running up against constituents, even Republican constituents, people who live in bright red districts and states, telling their members of Congress and their senators how much they dislike what Trump is doing. They're running up against people protesting against it. The pushback all over this country has thrown down stop strips in the road to flatten their tires and at least slow them down and sometimes to stop them. And it has happened everywhere. And none of it has been easy, given the scale of what they are trying to do to this country. But the feedback loop here is very clear 6 weeks in. It is working, and redoubled efforts will mean redoubled results.